I watched the blue sedan go up the winch, its rear wheels dangling over the ditch like a kid who fell asleep on a couch and slipped halfway to the floor. 3 days on the shoulder of County Road 17, same as the others. At this point, Leland from Carter's Towing didn't even ask who called it in. He ducked under the bumper, hooked chains, and kept his questions where they belonged, behind his teeth. "Keys still in it?" I asked. "In the cup holder," he said, not looking at me. "Phone too. No passcode. Last text is to Mom, never sent." He said it like the details might be the difference this time. They wouldn't be. By the time Leland had the sedan strapped down, the morning mist was lifting off the ditch grass. I could see the mile marker from here. White post, black numbers, a scuff at hip height from the snowplow. I knew where every scuff was on this road. You don't run a hardware store for 30 years in Ashburn County without learning which things last and which things try to. The Masons had been in 2 weeks. Fresh paint smell, discount furniture haul, a tire swing that didn't belong to the tree. They'd come in my shop the day after closing, bright as corns. Dad with the "I can learn plumbing from YouTube" smile. Mom with the polite worry. 2 kids, one already taller than me and trying not to look at me. "You Tom?" the dad asked, unless the sign out front is lying. "Grant Mason," he said, sticking out a hand. "We just took the Barrett place. Heard you're the man to see about everything." "That's what the sign says." We laughed like we were friends. "It's a thing newcomers do here. They skip ahead to the part where we've earned that." I pulled out a sheet from under the counter and set it on the register. "This your welcome packet," I said. He glanced at the county seal, then the list. His face did the thing all their faces did when they hit the news. "Is this a joke or like it?" "It's neither." His wife beamed aloud, one eyebrow up. "Do not stop on County Road 17 for anyone, Tom, that's strong." "Strong keeps you breathing," I said. "The laws are quiet so you can be too." The boy Evan grinned at his sister. "What's Larkspur Lake? Sounds like summer camp massacre." "Boating after Memorial Day," I said. "Daylight, life jackets." "And the lights?" he asked, reading #5 with relish. "Ignore lantern blue lights over Larkspur Lake. Especially those." Grant pushed the paper back to me with 2 fingers. "You know we left Chicago to get away from HOA bylaws. We can handle a little folklore." "You left for price," I said. "The folklore comes free." He chuckled, then saw I wasn't chuckling with him. The moment folded awkward and put itself away. "They bought caulk window pins, a lock set I recommended without explaining why. They left the sheet on the counter. I slid it into a fresh envelope and tucked it into their bag while I counted change. Folks don't mean to be careless. Carelessness is just easier to believe in than whatever waits on the shoulder at dusk. 2 nights later, the power flickered around 8. The town did its choreography. Lamps to half, curtains pulled taut like drumheads, the houses settling into their evening shapes. I walked my own checklist without thinking. Deadbolt, chain, back latch stuck unless you talk nice to it, and poured half a glass of water because full glasses sweat. Somewhere down County 17, a horn beeped twice, then 3 times too fast. My phone buzzed with the volunteer pager, missing / vehicle, CR 17 MM8, no contact, see sheriff. I could hear Leland's wrecker whining up Maine before the text finished. By morning we had grid maps and Gatorade at the sheriff's, and half the county showed up acting like this was a storm cleanup. We always start that way, optimistic enough to carry boxes, but the optimism gets left behind with the cold pizza and the high-vis vests. Sheriff dealt assignments. My crew took the north grid off the ditch, balsams thick as bad breath. We called Evan Mason's name into the underbrush because that's what you do when someone might answer. The balsams held the sound and gave it back to us in little pieces. By noon we'd found nothing but a flash of blue plastic 3 fingers deep in the mud. It looked like a grocery bag twisted to a rope, unwound itself when we pulled it free, then slid back into the ditch like it had someplace to be. "Blue bag," Bill said, wrinkling his face. "Who brings a blue bag to a ditch?" "People who don't know a ditch is where you end up," I said. We regrouped at 2. The Masons were there. Mrs. Mason asked me if we'd seen anything. I asked her if Evan had a blue bag. She blinked, shook her head. "Voicemail came in at 1:13, she said, pulling her phone like it was a talisman. "Empty screen, no audio, but the transcription says Dad. I'm at the mile marker with the blue bag. Evan doesn't use those. He hates them. He calls them ocean chokes." I looked at the sheriff. He looked at me. We both looked out the window where the sky was chewing on another cloud. We ran the grid until our throats rusted. By dark, the county did its other choreography: doors, latches, half-light, and the search party became tomorrow's list. That's how these nights work. You give the dark its room and it leaves you yours. I sat in my chair and opened Dad's old ledger. He'd written in all caps like a teacher, "If your name is spoken from the tree line, do not answer. If the voice is right, the mouth is wrong. If the voice is wrong, the mouth is near." He'd underlined that last one twice. At 10:11 p.m., something tapped my porch rail with the measured politeness of a neighbor who knows better. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps again. The air got that nickel taste behind the teeth. "Tom." A voice. My name folded into my mother's voice, which is a neat trick seeing as she's been in Maple Hollow 40 years now with a stone over her. I kept my eyes on the ledger. The page smelled like mouse nest and old rain. "Tom, honey," the voice said, "open up. They'll see me on the street. Half-light is mercy if you trust it." I kept the lamp on low, watched my own breath puddle in the window like fog on the inside of a jar. The tapping moved to the door frame, fingernails or something that learned fingernails by watching. "Tom," said the sheriff's voice, now perfect as a coin. "We got a kid, needs a blanket, open up." I took a slow sip of water and thought about blue bags. The tapping stopped. The voice tried 3 more names. I knew 2. The third belonged to a boy before my time, the first entry in Dad's ledger. At 11:47 p.m., and it is a wrongness how precise that minute is. The half-light in my living room shimmered like heat above a grill. The curtains pulled tight by their own idea. Something on the porch leaned into the door, and the door leaned back the way good doors do. I counted to 60 by 3s. The ledger said 3s help. On 60, the pressure eased. The house exhaled like a tired animal. Somewhere down on County 17, a horn beeped once like a hiccup. I slept in the chair. Some nights you choose the chair. Some nights the chair chooses you. Dawn stained the kitchen linoleum. I brewed coffee that tasted like pennies, and the pager buzzed for morning muster. At the sheriff's, the Masons looked like people the night had scooped out and set back down empty. Mrs. Mason clutched a map no one had given her and pointed to the mile marker. "It says blue bag." She kept telling anyone who would stay, like the detail might unlock a door in the morning that refused last night's key. Grant asked me if the rules were real now. He asked it the way a man asks if a volcano counts as a hill. I told him the same thing we always tell them. The quiet laws aren't there to be believed. They are there to be kept. He nodded like a person about to obey a recipe. Then, in the afternoon, his daughter stood in the mason's backyard while the line of pines whispered, and I watched a girl measure a forest with her ears and decide the measurement came out in her brother's shape. She said his name once. The woods answered in 2 places. By the time we reached the tree line, she was gone. That night, the half-light had waked. The curtains breathed. My ledger lay open to Dad's entries from 1989. He'd circled something I'd read 100 times and never loved. They learn rhythms before they learn words. Under it, in a younger hand, my own edition from 2003, they learn words before they learn faces. At 9:02 p.m., a lantern blue smear rolled across my ceiling, and every hair on my arms tried to lift the roof. The smear tugged toward Larkspur like tide. The phone lit with a new voicemail transcription that looked like a child's block letters. Dad M at the mile marker with the blue bag, and then don't answer the trees, as if the same hand wrote it, or the same error learned a rule. I set the phone face down and wrote a new line in the ledger. If they know the laws, they're watching us keep them. Outside, County 17 ran straight as a taut string. Somewhere near mile 8, wet footprints walked away from a car with no driver in it, and the ditch grass lay down in the shape of a boy too tall to be a boy anymore. The blue bag twisted and untwisted on the breeze until the breeze gave up. At 11:47, the half-light shifted again, and from the fence I heard the polite shuffle of more than one someone waiting to be invited into a life where the rules don't apply. I did what the packet says. I did nothing at all. The door camera saves one still frame on motion. In it, the porch holds 4 silhouettes. One is my height with my posture. Under the image, the system automatically tags faces. It recognizes one, me. The first time I went back to Maple Hollow Cemetery after dark, it was by accident. The second time, it was because grief has teeth, and it drags people where the rules tell you not to go. That Thursday, the Masons held a vigil for Evan. Candles in paper cups, neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder by the church. We don't usually hold vigils here. Most of us know better than to gather the dark's attention. But outsiders need ritual, something to focus their hands on besides shaking. We didn't stop them. No one ever does. Sarah Mason, Grant's wife, stood at the microphone reading a psalm through cracked lips. Behind her, Lucy fidgeted, eyes darting to the tree line, straining for a voice she thought she'd heard. I could feel the rules fraying like rope fibers just watching her. She was listening for the wrong thing. When the candles burned low, Grant called for one more search. Said Evan might be hiding, scared, waiting near the old cemetery. He pointed down Maple Hollow Road where the gate leaned like an old drunk. A few nodded, a few too many, that's how it starts. Sheriff Morrison tried to step in. Law says no after dark. His voice was calm, but I knew that tone. He might as well have been telling kids not to touch a hot stove. They'd touch it anyway. Grant looked at him like a man already hollowed. You'd stand there and do nothing while my son sleeps in the dirt. That silenced the crowd. Grief makes its own laws. So by 9:30, a knot of 20 people trailed Grant down to Maple Hollow, flashlights bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. I went with them. Not to break the law, no one who grew up here breaks it, but to make sure at least someone remembered how the law works when others forget. The cemetery gate was open. I swear I'd latched it myself last week. Its iron teeth gaped wider than they had any right to. The moment we stepped inside, the air turned heavy, like rain pressing on your skin even when the sky was clear. Stay on the main path, I said. My voice carried further than I meant it to. It bounced off the headstones like a thrown rock. Grant ignored me, sweeping his flashlight in wide arcs. "Evan," he called, his voice cracked. His wife joined in, her cries scattering through the marble rows. "That's the danger. Noise carries. The more you feed it, the more it answers." The beam of my light fell on a toppled angel statue, one I'd seen upright for 30 years. Tonight it lay face down, wings broken, head turned the wrong way, like it had been listening too long. "Compass check," I muttered, pulling mine from my pocket. The needle spun lazy, hunting for north but never finding it. Maple Hollow plays tricks on direction. Dad taught me that when I was 12. When you don't know where you are, the hollow knows exactly where you are. Beside me, Karen Whitley from the elementary school crossed herself. "Feels wrong." She was right. The longer we stayed, the more the rows shifted. Headstones leaned at angles they hadn't 5 minutes before. Names I remembered, familiar surnames, blurred when I tried to read them. The dead keep their secrets, the hollow helps them. We spread in a line. Someone shouted they saw a jacket near the far wall. The group surged that way, their lights swinging wild. But when we reached the spot, the jacket was gone. Just churned earth and a faint indentation, like someone kneeling or waiting. "Evan," Grant bellowed again, desperate. His voice cracked the silence. The silence answered back. At first I thought it was an echo, but echoes don't come from behind you, and they don't use the voice of a boy who's been gone 4 nights. "Dad," a thin call from the trees outside the cemetery. "Dad, I'm here." Grant dropped his flashlight and ran. Several others followed, tripping over stones, chasing the sound. The rest of us froze because we knew, Law #4, do not answer voices from the tree line. I didn't chase. I did what the law says, nothing. My heart clawed at my ribs while I listened to Grant's boots crunch on gravel, then fade into brush. He shouted his son's name until the shouts bent into sobs. The woods swallowed both. I bent to pick up his dropped flashlight. The lens was cracked, but it still worked. When I straightened, there was a handprint smeared across the inside of my windshield, except my truck was parked 2 miles away, locked. The glass was cold when I touched it, but the print was warm, like whoever left it still lingered. I heard Karen whisper behind me. "Tom." I turned. She was pointing at the church up the hill. Its bell rope had been cut years ago, frayed stub dangling. Yet the bell tolled once, deep, hollow. The sound traveled through my bones instead of my ears. "Time to go," I said, steady as I could. "Everyone who's left out now." And we gathered the stragglers, though some faces I'd seen earlier were already missing. The gate seemed further away than it should have been, but we found it, stumbling out onto the road like survivors from a flood. Behind us, Maple Hollow sighed, and the silence sealed over again. Sheriff took names back at the office. Grant never reappeared. His wife sat slumped in a chair, whispering prayers, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Lucy was silent. Her hands clutched her knees so hard I thought she might draw blood. She'd heard the voice too, maybe clearer than her father. By dawn, word spread that the Masons' house stood with every curtain drawn tight, every window latched. At least they'd learned one law. I went home, poured myself a coffee, and opened Dad's ledger. The entry for Maple Hollow read, "The Hollow does not keep the dead. The Hollow keeps the living who seek them." I underlined it twice. That evening, my truck camera pinged motion at 11:47 p.m. The still frame showed the cemetery gate wide open again. And in the black and white footage, just inside the gate, 20 handprints glowed faint on the ground, as if every missing soul had risen to kneel, waiting to be invited back. Lucy Mason stopped speaking after the vigil. She went silent like someone turned off a radio inside her. For 3 days she barely ate, barely blinked. The kind of quiet that wasn't peace, it was waiting. On the fourth night, the waiting ended. I was locking up the hardware store when my phone buzzed. Sheriff Morrison. Tom, we got activity. Mason girl swears she heard her brother in the Balsams. Thought you'd want to know. I did, because that wasn't just activity. That was Law 4 waiting to be broken. The balsam stands north of County Road 17 have a way of swallowing sound. You can whisper and the trees will carry it 50 yards. You can shout and it'll vanish like you never opened your mouth. Lucy stood at the edge, barefoot in dew-soaked grass, her father gripping her arm too tightly. She was trembling, but not from cold. She was listening. "Tell them," she hissed at Grant, her voice cracked from disuse. "Tell them what I heard." Grant looked hollow, like a man burned down to ash. "It was Evan's voice," he said, plain as day, calling her name. Sheriff looked at me. I shook my head. "Law 4, I said. Grant spat the words like they were poison. "Law 4 doesn't matter if my son is alive." That's the kind of grief the rules can't argue with. The trees sighed, windless. Then a voice came through, clear as a bell. "Lucy." I'll admit my knees weakened. It was perfect. The tone, the drawl, the adolescent crack mid-syllable. Evan, alive, pleading. Lucy's breath hitched. "That's him," she whispered, her fingers dug into her arms. "Lucy," I said, steady as stone, "if you answer once, you'll invite the second voice. That's how it works." Her wide eyes locked on mine. "Second voice." I nodded. "The first sounds real, the second doesn't, and if you answer both, you're theirs." Her father tightened his grip. "Don't scare her." I didn't answer. It wasn't about scaring, it was about keeping her breathing. When I was a boy, my father made me read his ledgers before bed instead of fairy tales. He'd point to certain passages until I memorized them. One of them came back to me now. "The hollow learns your voice by stealing the echo. One call in, one call out. If you return the call, it doubles. The second mouth opens wider. Wider is hungrier." Dad had written it after the Whitmore boy vanished in '73. Witnesses swore they heard him twice at once. One call from the trail, another from the ditch. His mother shouted back. Neither voice came home. I looked at Lucy, praying she remembered the packet I'd tucked into their grocery bag, praying she believed at least one page of it. Lucy. It came again, same pitch, same breath, like someone had recorded Evan and pressed play. That's what's wrong with them, it's too exact. Real people stumble, real voices shift. Mimicry doesn't, but to a sister, precision can sound like proof. She wrenched her arm from Grant and stepped toward the trees. "He needs me." "Stay put," Sheriff barked. His hand hovered near his holster, not that a gun ever did any good. The trees rustled, and then overlapping the first came another voice. "Lucy." Same syllables, same tone, but half a second late, like an echo that had learned how to speak but not when. Lucy gasped. She clutched her chest as if the air itself had turned heavy. "Two," she whispered. Grant tried to pull her back. She fought him, sudden strength ripping free. Her bare feet slapped into the tree line before anyone could stop her. "Lucy," he roared. Sheriff and I bolted after her, branches snapping against our arms. The balsams closed like a mouth, needles whispering. My flashlight beam jittered across trunks, shadows bending where they shouldn't. We heard her ahead, panting, sobbing. Then two voices calling back to her, both Evan, both wrong. We lost her. The woods swallowed sound, bent direction. Sheriff's radio fizzed with static, words stretching into nonsense. By the time we staggered back to the clearing, Grant was on his knees. His wife was screaming from the porch. Lucy was gone. That night, Sheriff pulled footage from a volunteer's trail cam. It caught 10 seconds before the battery died. In the grainy clip, Lucy runs into the balsams. Two figures step forward to meet her. Both look like Evan. Both raise their arms. One smiles a half-second later than the other. The screen cuts to black. I closed my father's ledger, my hands shaking. On the page he'd underlined in red it read, "Answer once, they learn your name. Answer twice, they learn your shape." And in the corner of the frame, just before it went black, Lucy's silhouette seemed to split, like she was being pulled in two directions at once. The storm rolled in just after sundown. A hard, clean wall of rain, the kind that made the streets shine like oil and set every gutter humming. In Ashburn County, storms were usually a blessing. Thunder covers a lot of things you don't want to hear, but this one hit at the wrong time, nightfall, and it shook the routine that had kept us alive for generations. By rule, Law 3 meant curtains drawn, windows latched, and lamps turned half-light. Not full bright, not total dark. A glow just strong enough to mark you as occupied but not tempting. Half-light was balance, half-light was mercy, but that storm knocked out power in half the grid. The rest of the town, scrambling for lanterns and generators, made mistakes. Too bright, too dark, too loud. Mistakes don't go unnoticed. Sheriff Morrison called me on the volunteer band. "Tom, I need you running checks. Too many folks lighting up like Christmas." So I pulled on my canvas coat, grabbed the spare packet of latches, and went house to house. Rain soaked through before I hit Main Street. By then the town was glowing in uneven patches. Some homes dark as tombs, others blazing like stage sets. A few right in the middle, half-light the way it should be. At Mrs. Bentley's, I found her sitting in pitch black, clutching a candle. "Power's out," she whispered. Didn't want to draw attention. I set her lamp to half and pulled her curtains tight. "Dark's just as loud as light," I told her. "Remember that." At the Jenkins place, every bulb in the house was on. Curtains gapped wide. Rain streaked down the glass, warping their silhouettes into easy prey. I killed half their breakers and yanked the rest to low wattage. Bill protested, but he didn't stop me. Folks argue, but they listen. That's what the checklist was, half enforcement, half ritual. If we didn't do it, the town unraveled. My father used to say half-light was like putting a bandage over a wound. You couldn't heal the place, but you could hide the blood. In the ledger he wrote, "Full dark draws them curious. Full light draws them hungry. Only balance keeps them passing by." It was an old myth, older than the county seal. He claimed the settlers first figured it out when their torches lured shapes to the cabins. Too bright, they came to the flame. Too dark, they came to the faces. Balance was survival. Tonight, balance was failing. By 10 p.m., the storm eased. That was worse. The rain had been cover. Without it, the air felt too still, like a held breath. Walking past the Whitley house, I stopped. Their living room lamp burned at half. Perfect. But the window glass bowed inward as if something pressed its weight against it, not breaking, just testing, like a finger against taut skin. I tapped the pane with my flashlight. The pressure eased. The glass rippled back into place. Inside, Karen mouthed thank you through the curtain, her face pale. That's when I heard it, hinges. Not opening, not closing, just the slow, patient creak of a lock being memorized. The sound came from her front porch, though no one stood there. It was like something tall leaned against the doorframe, bending to listen. A rhythm, testing, repeating, learning. The storm had taught them how to find the weak ones. On Maple Street, a shadow walked beside me, though nothing cast it. I caught its length across puddles, too tall, joints wrong. It moved in fits, swaying, then stopping, head cocked toward each lit window. I didn't look at it straight. Looking feeds them. Instead, I kept the checklist. Lamp, latch, curtain, lock, my father's mantra. The shadow followed, Hinge Creek echoing wherever I went. At the Carlson house, the youngest boy cried that someone was tapping the window in perfect time with the storm gutter, a rhythm he swore he'd never heard before. I told his mother, keep him away from glass. They don't need doors if they learn windows. She nodded, lips trembling. When I left, the tapping didn't stop. It just slowed like something patient. By midnight, half the homes were wrong, too bright, too dark, too late to fix them all. I stood at the crossroad, water dripping from my coat, and knew we'd broken Law 3. The town felt it too, the air heavy, sky low. Dogs refused to bark. Even the storm seemed to hush. The Hinge Creek rhythm came again, louder. Dozens of locks being tested all at once, metal straining, wood flexing. The town was a chorus of doors breathing in and out under invisible hands. I thought of Dad's ledger. He'd underlined it twice in red. They learn patterns. Once they know the sound of opening, they don't wait for permission. At 12:07 a.m., the silence broke. The emergency siren erupted, shrill and mournful, echoing down every street. It hadn't wailed in 11 years, not since old Mayor Collins vanished. And this time, it wasn't warning of weather or fire. It was warning that something tall, something patient, had learned how our locks sing. Tourists used to come to Ashburn County for the foliage. These days they come for content. The week after the siren wailed, 3 out-of-towners arrived with drone cases strapped to their backs and matching Explore the Unknown hoodies, urban explorers. They posted daily clips about abandoned malls, forgotten mines, paranormal hotspots. Ashburn apparently was next on their list. They didn't ask permission. They asked directions to Larkspur Lake. I gave them neither. But I saw their van later that evening parked by the boat ramp, decals plastered with hashtags, cameras already rolling. Larkspur Lake lies still most nights, black glass with only frogs to break it. But sometimes, especially in fog, blue halos skim the water. They look like lanterns carried on invisible boats, drifting in patterns too neat for chance. We learned generations ago, ignore them. Don't look long, don't follow. Law 5. The vloggers wanted the opposite. They set up tripods along the old pier, lenses pointing into the mist. Their laughter carried across the water, forced, high-pitched, the kind people use when they are afraid but won't admit it. From my truck up the hill, I watched halos begin to gather. 1, then 3. Then a dozen, perfect rings sliding just above the surface, never touching. The explorers whooped like kids on a roller coaster. Jackpot! One shouted. The halos pulsed brighter, like they'd been waiting for an audience. Around midnight the lake grew quiet. Even the frogs stopped. That silence presses wrong like a heavy hand over your ears. I saw one of them, purple hair, holding a shotgun mic, lean over the pier. They look like they're calling us, she said. Her friend laughed nervously, but she wasn't wrong. The halos moved in formation, curving inward, circling the pier. Then the cameras died. Every red recording light winked out at once, screens black. The explorers panicked, fumbling with batteries. One shouted, "It's still rolling audio." The mics picked up only breath, panicked breath, nothing else. No frogs, no water lap, no wind, just breathe rising too fast, too shallow. One of them whispered, "It's under us." The audio cut. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my chair, watching the street lamps flicker, waiting for the call that never came. At dawn, I drove back to Larkspur. The van was gone, so were the explorers. The pier remained, but the boards were wrong. They'd been rearranged, spiraled outward, concentric rings of wood slats pried up and nailed back down in perfect geometry, like the lake had borrowed carpenters for the night. In the center of the spiral lay a single microphone, still recording. Sheriff arrived minutes later. He shook his head when he saw the boards. "Never seen them arrange things so neat," he muttered. We played back the file. For 10 minutes, only static and breath. Then a voice, flat, genderless, counted. 1, 2, 3, we froze. 4, 5, 6. Then silence. And then just before the file cut, a seventh voice, deeper, doubled, not quite human. 6, quiet, laws. Sheriff stopped the playback. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. 7, he whispered. Why did it count to 7? I didn't answer because I already knew the truth. We only had 6 laws, but something in the lake thought there should be another. I've lived on Maple Street 32 years, and in that time I've learned this. If something happens at the same time every night, it isn't chance, it's schedule, and schedules mean intent. The first time I noticed them, it was a Wednesday, 11:47 p.m. sharp. I was in my chair with a half-light lamp glowing, ledger open on my lap. I heard the creak of wood outside, thought it was a branch at first, then another creak, steady, rhythmic. When I peeked through the curtain, there they were, figures standing at every fence post along the street, not moving, not talking, just waiting like cattle at a gate. The laws never named the fence line directly, but Dad had written in his notes, "Do not approach what waits at the border. Boundaries protect both sides." I understood it then. They weren't trying to come in, they were measuring. Each figure stood exactly 1 yard apart, eyes tilted toward the houses. Some tall, some short, some wrong in proportion, but all still, too still. I sat frozen, barely breathing until 11:59, and as if on cue they turned away and vanished between houses without a sound. The next night they returned, same time, same number, but this time I realized they weren't just standing, they were measuring. One bent at the waist, head almost scraping the soil, tracing a line in the dirt between posts. Another lifted a hand, fingers splayed wide, as if testing air currents. At the Jenkins property, a figure stooped, stretching an arm unnaturally long across 2 yards, fingertips brushing the mailbox. By morning, chalk-white circles appeared on the pavement. Perfect diameter, 6 feet across, drawn around the posts. No one saw who made them. Mrs. Bentley swore she heard scratching like slate against stone at midnight, but when she looked, the circles were already finished. By the 3rd night, I wasn't the only one awake. Sheriff sat in his cruiser at the corner, headlights off, watching. We both saw it. One figure bent low, knees backwards, moving in a gait I can only call bipedal hoofprints. The imprints it left in the mud looked like deer, but lined up heel to toe as if a man were walking on hooves. The figure stopped at each post, pressed its head sideways against the wood and listened. Listening for what, I didn't want to know. When Sheriff stepped out, flashlight aimed, the beam passed through the figure like smoke. It turned its head toward him, and the cruiser radio erupted with static. Sheriff backed up, muttering, "Do not approach, do not approach." That night I opened Dad's ledger to the section on boundaries. His handwriting slanted, hurried. "They map us, not the land us. Each yard is a measure of breathing." Beneath it in darker ink, "If they finish, we lose the fence." I didn't know what losing the fence meant, but I had a feeling I would soon. Friday, the 6th night, I sat ready. Coffee cold, chair angled to the window. At 11:47, the figures came again, this time closer. Their heads tilted, necks bending too far as if testing how human posture worked. One raised an arm and pointed at my house. Not a gesture, just a slow, deliberate acknowledgement. I swallowed hard, stayed still, stayed silent. By midnight they drifted away as usual, but my porch camera pinged motion at 11:58. I pulled up the footage. The grainy black and white showed my street empty except for one figure across the road. Same build as me, same coat, same slouching shoulders. The system tagged the face automatically. Identified Thomas Harrow. I was still in the chair. I hadn't moved. But across the street my silhouette tilted its head, like it knew the camera was watching. We used to pack the school gym for basketball games. On Saturday night, we packed it for survival. Ashburn's population was 61. By the end of the meeting, it would be 49. Mayor Wilson stood at the podium, shuffling papers with trembling fingers. The man was 73, but his voice carried like the town bell when he wanted it to. "Let's get this out of the way first," he said. "Who intends to leave?" Silence. Then Bill Jenkins raised his hand. His wife Laura followed. Then the Carlsons. Then 3 other families, all with kids. We counted. 12 souls gone. Population 49. No one argued. No one begged them to stay. When you've seen enough disappearances, you know not to gamble children against tradition. Sheriff Morrison spoke next, uniform rumpled, eyes red. State Highway Department confirmed they are widening County Road 17. Guard rails, shoulders, new signage. Work starts in 4 weeks. A low murmur spread. We all knew what that meant. Outsiders, dozens of them, drivers who wouldn't know Law One from a campfire store. Karen Whitley asked the question first. "How do we stop them?" Sheriff rubbed his temples. "We don't. It's state jurisdiction. Best we can do is warn them, maybe slow it down." That landed like a stone in a pond. Outsiders breaking rules wasn't theory anymore. It was a timeline. Then Diane from the diner stood up, cheeks flushed. "There's something else," she said. "Some blogger listed us in an article, America's Most Haunted Small Towns. Folks online are already talking about road trips, ghost hunters, influencers." The groan that followed wasn't fear so much as exhaustion. We'd held the balance for decades. The balance can't survive hashtags, misses. Bentley muttered, "They'll come looking for stories. They'll find graves." I thought of the vloggers at Larkspur, of their spiral pier wars. The world was opening its door wider to our rules, and our rules were never meant to be shared. That's when Mark Sanderson from the gas station stood up. He carried the kind of anger that runs on gasoline fumes and bad sleep. "Then we make our own rules," he barked. "We don't let outsiders in. Post armed guards. Block 17 ourselves. Militia if it comes to it." A few nodded. Desperation looks like agreement sometimes. Mayor Wilson cut him down fast. "We won't become vigilantes. The laws keep us alive, not guns. And you know damn well bullets don't stop what's out there." The silence that followed was heavy, but it was the kind of silence that means people remember. No one wanted a firefight with things that don't bleed. I stood then, holding Dad's old ledger under my arm. "We can't stop outsiders, but we can protect ourselves. Patrols, routes. Each of us takes a law to guard." The room shifted. People leaned forward. "Route 17 needs eyes every night," I said. "Warn travelers before they stop for a hitchhiker. Cemetery needs daily checks. Porter's Lake too. Half-light checks at dusk. Fence lines before midnight." Morrison nodded slowly. "We'll draft a roster, no one alone. Radios every 15 minutes. If you can't fight them, you can still buy time." Pens scratched. Names went on paper. It wasn't a solution, but it was something to hold. Sometimes holding something is survival enough. The meeting dragged past 2 hours. By the end, families leaving had said their goodbyes. Patrol rosters filled 3 sheets. We were tired but steady. That's when Morrison's phone buzzed. He reads silently, face turning the color of wet ash. "What is it?" The mayor asked. Morrison cleared his throat. Email from the new state contractor scheduling for the road project. He looked around the room before speaking the last words. They say they'll be doing the heavy work at night, too hot during the day. The gym went so quiet I swear I heard the rafters creak. I closed my ledger with hands that wouldn't stay still. Night work. On County Road 17. The hitchhikers wouldn't have to wait anymore. They'd have a line of strangers coming to them. And this time, the rules wouldn't just be ours to keep. The first trucks came at 2 a.m., their hazard lights sweeping orange across the pines. I watched from the ridge above County Road 17, thermos in hand, ledger on the seat beside me. We'd begged them not to work at night, told them about wildlife, about safety, even about soil instability. But contracts don't listen, contractors less so. They poured anyway. The crew moved with the confidence of men used to long nights, cigarettes glowing, boots stomping in fresh gravel. Floodlights bathed the road in white that looked too clean, too careless. By 3 o'clock, a stretch of new curb gleamed damp and gray, smoothing under their trowels. Steam rose into the cool air. That's when I saw it, patterns in the wet cement, not footprints, not animal tracks, but handprints, dozens of them pressed in shallow before the concrete cured. Each hand too long, each finger bent with an extra joint, like someone had folded new knuckles into the mold of a person. The men swore they hadn't touched the pour, but the marks kept appearing, fresh and deep, even as they smoothed them flat. At 3:47, the emergency siren began its slow rise and fall, not triggered by us, triggered by them, and riding beneath its wail came another sound, chanting. Not words we knew, not English, not even human rhythm, but it matched the siren note for note, like a second voice harmonizing with catastrophe. The contractors glanced around, uneasy, asking each other if it was coyotes, if it was wind, but we knew. Everyone in Ashburn knew. The chanting was invitation. One of the men dropped a length of rebar while checking the forms. The rod hit pavement, clattered, and then hummed, not like metal ringing, like a tuning fork struck against something deeper. The hum vibrated in the air, resonant, almost electric. The crew stepped back, confused, but I could feel it through my boots. The hum wasn't fading, it was answering. Every floodlight flickered. The wet cement rippled like water, handprints surfacing and sinking in time with the rebar's song. Sheriff whispered beside me, "They are tuning." By 4 o'clock, the men were rattled but determined. Concrete doesn't wait. They kept pouring, kept smoothing, kept pretending they didn't notice the marks appearing under their tools. The foreman, broad-shouldered, hard-eyed, shouted orders to keep morale up. He didn't hear the voices the way we did. At 4:11, the chanting stopped. The woods went silent, and then from the tree line a single voice called out, high, trembling, "Mom." Every Ashburn native froze. It was too sharp, too clear, too late in the season for children to be outside. The foreman didn't freeze. He dropped his clipboard and turned toward the trees, his jaw clenched, eyes wet. "My boy," he whispered. He took a step forward. Sheriff hissed, "Don't answer, don't," but the foreman already had. "Son," he called back. The woods breathed. Branches bowed. The floodlights guttered. And something answered his voice with his own. The church on Maple Hollow Hill hasn't held a proper service in 15 years. We keep the doors locked, the bell rope cut, the pews gathering dust. Faith here isn't a matter of sermons anymore. It's a matter of laws. So when the bells began ringing just after midnight, every stomach in Ashburn clenched. I was sitting in my chair when the first toll echoed across town. Deep, iron, slow. The kind that crawls under your ribs. Sheriff called within minutes. You hearing it too?" I didn't answer because the rope had been cut a decade ago. I'd helped cut it. Still, the bells rang 3 times, then again. Then a full peal, as if the whole congregation had returned to pull the line, except there was no line. By the time we reached the church, the windows glowed faintly from within, though no lamps burned inside. The sound grew louder, voices layered in harmony, dozens of them, singing old hymns. But the pitch was wrong. Every note leaned half a key downward, dragging the melody into something sour. A song you knew, twisted until your teeth ached just hearing it. Sheriff muttered, "Sounds like the whole county's in there." I shook my head. Not ours, borrowed. Because I recognized some of those voices. People who'd vanished, Evan Mason, the film students, even Mayor Collins. Their tones wove into the hymn, speaking faith in words they'd never sung. We forced the doors. The nave stood empty, dust unmoved. No choir, no light, just the smell of damp earth. But the song continued, loud as ever, circling the rafters like bats. That's when Karen gasped and pointed upward. Hanging from the belfry beam, tied in a loose knot, was Lucy Mason's red scarf. The same one she'd worn the night she ran into the balsams. The fabric swayed, though no breeze touched it. Sheriff whispered, "They're staging the choir." In Dad's ledger I'd once read, "They take the voices of the missing and stitch them into choirs. Hymns are lures. If you sing back, you join the hymn." I hadn't believed it until that moment. The hymn shifted then, the key dropping lower. The words fractured, no longer English. Just syllables stretched too long, consonants cracking like bone. I clapped my hands over my ears. Didn't help. The sound wasn't entering from outside. It was blooming inside my head. We scrambled up the belfry stairs, each step coated with years of dust. At the top, the bell swayed on its rusted hinge, and dangling beside it was the rope. Not cut. Whole, thick hemp fibers twisting down into the dark. Sheriff touched it and jerked his hand away. His palm dripped water, because the rope wasn't dry, it was slick, dripping steadily. The puddle at our feet spread, seeping across the wood. It wasn't rainwater, it smelled of algae, of silt, of larkspur lake. The bells tolled again, vibrating the tower under our boots. And as the rope swung, droplets splattered our faces. Cold, lake-borne water, as though whatever had taken the choir wasn't in the church at all. It was pulling from below the lake. Journalists rarely find Ashburn on purpose. The highways curve wide, the maps mislabel the county lines. But sometimes one makes it through. This one wore a leather satchel and carried 2 cameras slung like weapons. He introduced himself at Diane's diner with a handshake and a grin too wide. "Name's Keller, independent journalist. I hear you folks have stories. I give them exposure." The way he said it, like he was offering salvation. He slid into the booth across from me, ordered black coffee, and leaned in. "You've got rules, right? Hitchhikers, cemeteries, lake lights. My readers eat that up. I put Ashburn online, you get awareness, tourism, might even save your town. I set my ledger on the counter. You think exposure's what we need?" He smiled. "Fame buys leverage, folklore with clicks, everybody wins." I shook my head. "The rules aren't folklore, they are survival." "Then share them," he pressed. "I'll make sure people listen." "No," I said flat, "we don't trade them." That night I went back to my father's ledger. The 1989 entry was one I never liked reading. The gray man came to town. He offered knowledge for names. We gave him a trade, 1 page of rules written proper. In return, he gave us weather, promised no storms that winter. Dad had underlined the last part 3 times. The storm came anyway. Took 5 houses, 7 souls, never trade. They want proper names. Names are keys. I ran my fingers over the words. The ink had bled where Dad's hand had shaken. He'd known better too late. Keller wasn't done. He followed me into the hardware store the next morning, camera already running. "Thomas Harrow," he announced to no one, lens pointed at my face. "Local store owner, keeper of the Ashburn rules. Tell us about them." I shoved the lens down. "Turn it off." "Come on," he coaxed. "Give me just one. I'll put your name in print, credit where it's due." I thought of Dad's ledger, the warning, they want proper names. I leaned close. "If you say my name into that thing again, it won't be me who answers." For the first time his smile faltered. But that night he went live anyway. Parked by the cemetery gates, ring light glowing, voice cheerful. "Hey folks, Keller here. Ashburn County, population dropping, secrets rising. Tonight I'm going to prove the locals wrong. Let's talk about their 6 quiet laws." The comments rolled in fast. Skeptics, fans, emojis, and then names. "Miss you, Evan. Still here, Lucy. We never left." The accounts posted profile pictures I recognized. Grainy school portraits, smiling faces from missing posters, people Ashburn had already buried. Keller laughed nervously. "Look at this engagement." But the screen kept filling. Lines of text typing themselves. Trade, names, 6. One more. I shut my laptop hard, but the voices stayed. A faint chorus leaking through the diner's Wi-Fi, twisting the hymn from the church into chat bubbles and profile icons. And when Keller called my name again into the camera, the comments all answered in unison. "Thomas Harrow is ours. Patrol duty only works if you know where the roads go. In Ashburn County, we thought we knew every mile. CR 17, Maple Hollow, the loops around Porter's Lake, paths memorized like prayers. But this month the roads began folding back on themselves." Bill Jenkins was the first to notice. He called over the radio during his Route 17 shift. "My GPS shows I've circled town 3 times, he said, voice tight. "Haven't turned once." We checked his odometer, 8 miles. Checked his compass, spinning. Checked his eyes, red-rimmed and wet. He swore he'd passed the same farmhouse 3 times in 5 minutes. Trouble is, the farmhouse he described burned down in 1982. By morning, the mapping apps showed every Ashburn road collapsing into a single knot. No routes out, just loops. Sheriff brought in state surveyors once. That was years back. Their stakes still dotted the field margins, plastic ribbons fading in the weather. Last week I walked the fence line by Porter's Lake. The stakes were fresh again, bright red flags, numbers inked bold. Except they weren't where they should have been. Each stake was 2 feet closer to the lake, as if the land itself was retreating. Karen Whitley found the same by the school. "The yard's shrinking," she said, showing me lines where children once played. "It's like they're redrawing the ground." The final straw came Monday morning. Only a handful of children still lived in Ashburn, but the bus ran anyway. Routine is survival. That day, the bus turned left where it had always turned right. The driver swore he hadn't touched the wheel. The kids swore they saw signs pointing a new way. By the time Sheriff chased it down, the bus was circling the cemetery. Round and round, diesel growling, doors locked from the outside. The children pressed their palms to the windows, eyes wide. Mouths moving, but no sound came out. When the engine finally stalled, the kids climbed out dazed, claiming they'd only ridden 5 minutes. Sheriff's watch showed 90. That evening, as I sat with coffee gone cold, the sun dipped below the tree line. We sighed relief. Night comes at its hour, predictable, but 15 minutes later the sky lit gold again. The sun rose, stuttering back into place like a film reel reversed. We endured a second sunset that night. Longer. slower. Wrong. The ledger trembled in my hands when I wrote it down. My father had underlined a phrase decades earlier. When the sky repeats, you are no longer navigating land, you are navigating them. After 2 nights of double sunsets, I staggered home from patrol, boots caked with dust that didn't smell like our soil. My head swam with fatigue. I opened my ledger to log the shift. My handwriting shook, letters uneven. But then I saw something worse. The page already contained the entry. The words were mine, but written in a second hand. Neater, straighter. The ink still wet. Thomas Harrow patrolled 12 miles. He did not return alone. I dropped the pen. The ledger closed itself with a snap. In the silence of my kitchen, I heard pages rustle, though no wind stirred. Someone else was keeping my record now, and they wrote like they'd been doing it for years. The Barrett place had been empty 10 years. Folks avoided it, not because of any one rule, but because the house itself seemed tired of pretending. Shutters leaned, grass grew too fast, and the attic window never reflected right. So when a realty team out of the city came in with clipboards and banners and declared an open house, Ashburn bristled. Windows wide, curtains tied back, smell of new paint fighting the rot. They invited anyone and everyone to tour. We knew what open meant here. It didn't mean welcome, it meant exposed. They staged it like a catalog, flowers in vases, soft jazz through a Bluetooth speaker, a tray of chocolate chip cookies steaming on the counter. I walked through out of duty, ledger under my arm, nodding as they tried to sell me on crown molding. But the cookies, they crumbled black within minutes. Not burned, rotted. Dough turned to dust, chocolate to chalk. One realtor laughed nervously. Guess I used the wrong batch. I didn't correct her. I knew what it was. Food doesn't keep where they linger. Upstairs, the house smelled different. Not paint, not mildew, pond weeds. Thick green stink like something dragged fresh from Larkspur Lake had been wrung out in the rafters. I followed the scent into the attic. The realtors hadn't staged this room. No flowers, no rugs, just dust and beams and one small window. And the scent, heavy enough to taste. I pressed a hand to the sill, damp. When I pulled back, slime webbed between my fingers. By dusk, a handful of interested buyers arrived. The realty team beamed, traffic was good, exposure better. But one man drew my eye immediately. Tall, clean jacket, smile too wide, and yet no shoelaces, shoes bare, tongues flapping with each step. He never blinked. Not once in the 30 minutes he wandered room to room, tracing the walls with fingertips like a blind man memorizing space. When he caught me watching, he tilted his head in that way the fence-line figures did. Slow, curious, testing posture. The open house wrapped at 9. Realtors packed up, cheerful, relieved. The shoeless buyer drifted away without signing a single form. Later, one of the agents uploaded photos to the listing site. Wide shots of each room, sun slanting golden across the hardwood. I clicked through them on my laptop. Kitchen, living room, hallway. Then I stopped. In the master bedroom photo, the shoeless buyer stood in the corner. In the next photo, same room, different angle, he stood there again, and again in the third. Except this time there were 4 of him, all identical, same jacket, same vacant smile, each one facing a different wall. The caption beneath the gallery read, "Charming family home, move-in ready." But the photos told the truth. The room was already occupied, and the buyers didn't need contracts. The council decided we needed numbers. Not rumors, not guesses, a census. Sheriff Morrison and I took clipboards and flashlights and went door to door. The town had dwindled since the contractor, since the open house, since too many nights when rules bent like wet wood. Population of Ashburn 34, or so we thought. We carried lists, not for paperwork, for memory. Names were anchors here. You spoke them, wrote them, repeated them so they wouldn't fade. My father drilled it into me. Lose count, lose people. At the Whitley place we found Karen and her niece. 2 bodies, 2 shadows, names recorded. At Mrs. Bentley's we found one. She swore her grandson had gone to bed hours earlier. His room was neat, covers folded, no prints in the dust. Her voice cracked when she asked me to write his name anyway. I did, but the ink smudged as though the page resisted. By the 3rd house we noticed it. Some folks had no shadows. They stood in the porch light same as always, spoke the same, wore the same clothes, but the ground didn't answer their shape. When we asked about it, they looked confused. One man even insisted we were wrong, then leaned forward so far into the light he should have doubled himself across the dirt. Nothing. Morrison whispered, "Do we count them?" I gripped the pen tighter. If we don't, who will? So we wrote the names, and each time, the letters came out thinner, fainter, like the paper itself didn't want them. At a house on Larkspur Road, no one answered, but a knock came anyway. From inside the sealed crawlspace, 3 raps steady as heartbeat. The sheriff and I froze. The boards had been nailed shut for years, crossbars weathered gray. Then a voice, muffled, childlike. "Count me," Morrison hissed. "Don't answer." I raised my pen. My hand moved without me, writing a name I didn't know. 4 letters, short, foreign. When I blinked, the page was blank again. The crawlspace stayed silent. By dawn we had walked the whole town. Our sheets should have matched. They didn't. My count, 29, Morrison's 31. When we cross-checked, half the names refused to line up. Some appeared twice, some not at all, some in handwriting neither of us remembered making. We sat in his cruiser, headlights off, listening to the early crickets, both of us too tired to speak. And then, from every direction at once, porches, windows, fence lines, came voices. Dozens, hundreds, answering roll call. Every house in Ashburn speaking back at once, each name shouted in perfect unison. Not just the living, not just the gone, all of them. And the town counted itself. My father kept a mason's line in the hardware store, a spool of blue chalk string. He used it to snap straight cuts on wood, mark fence lines, and measure boundaries that didn't want to stay still. After the census failed, after names wouldn't hold, I remembered one line from his ledger. "If you doubt the ground, lay string. It won't lie unless they pull it." So I took the spool and walked out into the street. The town was too quiet, the kind of quiet where even insects hide. I knotted the end of the blue line to my porch rail and began walking. Each step unspooled the thread behind me, leaving a faint chalk dust along the pavement. Block after block, the line trailed neat, humming against the spool. Half an hour later, I reached the diner. The spool should have been half gone. Instead, it was nearly full. When I looked back, the thread didn't stretch behind me the way it should. It doubled, curved, looped around corners I hadn't taken. And then, the free end brushed my boot. The line I'd unspooled returned to my hand from the opposite direction. I kept walking, following the thread like a leash. The line trembled, slack, then pulled taut. When I gathered it in, I found knots tied into it, sets of 3. Each knot tighter than the last, chalk dust rubbed smooth where fingers had touched. Not mine, not human. By the time I reached Maple Hollow, the line was patterned with 3s all the way down, like prayer beads. Every time I tried to untie one, the knot cinched tighter, cutting the string thinner, sharper. I pressed on until the line veered off the street and sloped down toward Larkspur. It didn't stop at the bank. It dipped straight into the black water, vanishing beneath ripples that didn't belong to wind. The spool in my hand kept unspooling, chalk string disappearing into the lake as though the water had no bottom. I should have cut it, should have walked away. Instead, I braced my boots and let the line run, spooling out into darkness, chalk hissing as it vanished into the surface. The lake whispered with each pull like breath dragged through reeds. Then the line jerked, not slack, not drifting. Something on the other end tugged back. The spool rattled in my palm, string burning hot through my fingers. And I realized I wasn't measuring the town anymore. The town was measuring me. The rules had always given us one small mercy, time. They came at night. After dusk, before dawn, that boundary was ironclad, the one protection even outsiders stumbled into by accident. But on Tuesday they broke it. The procession entered town while the sun was still up. It began with the dogs. They never barked after dark. This time they howled before the street lamps even flickered on. I stepped onto the porch, ledger tucked under my arm, and saw them. Figures moving down Main Street. Dozens. Light should have burned them back. It didn't. Their shapes blurred in gold daylight, long shadows bending away instead of toward the sun. For the first time in my life, dusk wasn't permission anymore. I raced to check the lamps, turned them low, curtains drawn just so. The ritual of half-light had always held. But when the figures reached the houses, the lamps stuttered. Bright, dark, bright. The glass warped inward as if the bulbs were lungs, breathing against their will. At Mrs. Bentley's, I saw silhouettes pause at her porch. She'd kept her half-light perfect. Still, one figure leaned its face to her window and the pane flexed like wax under heat. I heard her sobbing, heard her whisper, it doesn't work anymore. By full dusk they were everywhere, stepping onto porches, testing knobs, leaning weight against doors that pulsed inward like muscle. I kept still in my chair, hands on my knees, repeating the laws in my head. They'd always worked if you followed them, always, but the air tonight felt unmoored. The laws weren't laws anymore, they were suggestions, and suggestions don't stop hunger. At 8:47 p.m., my front door exhaled. The wood bent inward with each pulse, brass knob rattling in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Sheriff's voice cracked over the radio. They're inside 2 houses already. No signs of entry. Doors just breathed them in. Static swallowed his words. I held my ledger tight. My father's handwriting swam across the page. When the hour breaks, you must choose anchor by name or face the fence. At 9:13, the procession stopped outside my own yard. Every figure turned toward my porch. Some too tall, some too many jointed, some nearly human. They waited. The ledger throbbed warm in my hands. A blank page fluttered open, as if expecting a signature. If I wrote a name, anchored someone, I might hold them here, keep them from vanishing like the rest. But the last law burned in my mind. Law 6. Never approach the fence. Across the street, the fence posts glowed faint blue, the same color as my mason's line when the thing tugged it from the lake. The procession stepped closer. My door bowed inward, hinges squealing like breath through teeth. I had 2 choices. Write a name, bind a soul, or break Law 6, step off my porch, approach the fence. The ledger's pen rolled into my palm on its own. Outside, the fence pulsed like a heartbeat, and the procession whispered in unison, not with voices but with mine. Choose Thomas. The night the laws failed, I realized there was only one way forward, turn the rules on themselves. They'd been our guardrails for centuries, yes, but guardrails can also be cages, and cages can be bent into traps. So I opened my father's ledger, tore out the first page, and began to rewrite. We started with the half-light. If the ritual no longer worked house by house, we would scale it. Stringed bulbs, lanterns, even headlamps from abandoned cars. We laid them across Main Street in a grid, checkerboard squares of dim pools. At midnight, the procession entered as always, shapes too long, joints too many. They stepped into the grid and faltered. Their forms stretched, splitting between squares, caught. The half-light wasn't failing, it had only been misaimed. At Larkspur Lake, the halos rose, blue rings skimming water, whispering for us to follow. But this time we came with mirrors. We stripped them from cars, angled them along the pier. When the halos flared, their own glow bounced back. Dozens of false lanterns glittered across the black. The lake hissed, surface boiling. The halos collapsed in confusion, swirling against each other until the water stilled. We hadn't followed. We'd forced them to follow themselves. The chanting came next, low, guttural, matched to the town siren's pitch. Sheriff wired the signal into a loop, playing it back at random intervals, overlapping the hymn until the rhythm collapsed. The voices cracked. For the first time in memory, they sounded wrong to themselves. A howl rose from the cemetery as gravestones rattled against the discord. The hardest part came last, names. We gathered the whole town, 30-some left, frightened but resolute, into the school gym. One by one, we read the census backwards, not forward, not in order, reverse. Lucy Mason, then her father, then her brother, the missing, the dead, almost forgotten. Each name spoken in reverse order of vanishing, anchoring them not in life but in memory. And as the last name left our lips, the gym shook, doors rattled, windows bulged inward, then silence. When we emerged at dawn, the procession was gone. Not everyone returned. Too many had been gone too long, but some did. Lucy Mason stumbled out of the balsams, hair white, eyes hollow but breathing. Two of the film students staggered from the cemetery gates, coughing like water. The rest remained only as voices. County Road 17 was shut down by the state indefinitely. Construction equipment abandoned in neat rows, engines rusting where they'd been parked. Population of Ashburn stabilized in the 30s. Enough to hold on, enough to remember. Weeks later, a new shipment of stationery arrived at Town Hall. Standard order, reams of paper, ink, pamphlet stock. The clerk printed fresh, welcome packets as tradition demanded. We opened the first, the seal of Ashburn stamped at the top. The list below in bold, 7 quiet laws. The 7th read, do not trade what you cannot keep. No one remembered writing it. No one admitted to authoring, but the ink was fresh, and the page was already smudged. Ashburn lived, barely. The ledger closed but not locked. Because once you add a new law, you're admitting the rest can break.